Hey guys, welcome to my presentation on Angels in America. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the presence of angels and what they mean and what their context in the story is, or in the play is. And basically, as I'm talking, if you guys have any questions or comments, concerns, anything like that, or like other points to make, feel free to write them down, because we're going to have a Google Meet on Friday or tomorrow or today. So Friday at 2. And so that'll just be, you guys can ask us all the questions that you want, make any comments, pose counter arguments, stuff like that. It's not going to be a full class because after that you'll go online and you're going to do a different assignment, like a forum, and you'll all be assigned to one forum that you have to give like a full answer to, and it'll have a question. It'll be about one of our topics, and basically you'll just give a full response to one of them, and then you'll go into the other forums, and then there you're going to respond to just someone else's full response. So you just give like a 1 or 2 sentence kind of response saying you agree, you disagree, asking a question about what they stated. But yeah, so just make sure that you write down any questions, comments, or concerns, so that we have something to talk about on Friday. And like I said, it doesn't need to be a full class, but having a little bit of something to talk about would be definitely helpful. So like I said, I'm going to talk about the presence of angels. So first of all, I wanted to talk about the title. It's Angels in America. You guys know that, but it's taken from one of Lewis's lines on page 96, in which he says, it's not really about race. Like the spiritualists try to use that stuff. Are you enlightened? Are you centered, channeled, whatever? This is reaching out for a spiritual past in a country where no indigenous spirits exist. Only the Indians, I mean Native American spirits, and we killed them off, so now there are no gods here. No ghosts and spirits in America. There are no angels in America. No spiritual past, no racial past. There's only the political, and the decoys and the ploys to maneuver around the inescapable battle of politics, the shifting downwards and outwards of political power to the people. So I thought this was really interesting because in a historical sense, at the time that this takes place, there was a very prominent conservative movement happening, with Reagan being the president. And the Conservative Party's views were mainly based in Christian principles and values. So in this, Lewis is saying that there is a lack of these religious figures in a heavily religious society. It's almost like him pushing against these values when they are being used to push a political agenda. But he's also showing that it's not just against conservatives, because when he says the word spirituality, he's talking about people who aren't Christian, who believe in meditation, and they're like the hippies of the time. So basically, he's talking about both the left and the right, because hippies obviously probably don't have the same political values as conservatives do or Christians do, just because their religious principles are so different. So another important question to ask is, are the angels real? And it seems obvious that the angels in this sense, or in this play, are not the typical angels represented in religion. Instead, they're personal experiences for each person that they show up to, and they represent something else for each of them. And so that's what I think they mean. I think they are supposed to be a personal experience for each of the characters. According to, this is how I interpreted it. For Prior, the angels are a sign of his deterioration due to his illness, and I think they're a manifestation of his fear of death. The ghosts of Prior's past are a great example because they're both older, but Prior will die a younger man, and that's just the nature of his issue. And he keeps asking them, am I going to die? Am I going to die? And they say death is inevitable. But I think he's trying to solve his fear of death through them, but it's not really working out how he wants it to. For Harper, the angel, or the ghost in her case, Mr. Lies, is her escape from her life and her constant miserable state. this offers an interesting dynamic since Joe is constantly offering her an opportunity to move to DC and leave, but she doesn't take it. But then the second that Mr. Lies gives her the opportunity to leave, she does take it. Harper's life has a lot of structure due to her religion too, so I think it's really interesting that she chooses to go to Antarctica, because Antarctica is so lawless and like unstructured, and it gives her the opportunity to start anew. This binary also kind of relates to her meeting Prior in their mutual dream scene. He leads an opposite life to hers, and she's very intrigued by his lifestyle, so I thought that was really interesting. And it's a kind of similar situation with her going to Antarctica. The name Mr. Lies is also really important, I think. It seems that Harper, in calling him Mr. Lies, understands that what he's offering to her is not, and what even like he brings to her or gives to her when he brings her to Antarctica, is not real, nor is it realistic. But she still chooses to pursue his offers, because I think it's like she knows that it's the best that she can get right now. It's the farthest away from her current life that she's going to get currently. Something very important to note, though, I think, is Harper's acquired autonomy in her trip to Antarctica with Mr. Lies. So in Act 3, Scene 3, on pages 106 and 107, Harper says that she doesn't, on page 106, she says that she's sick of details. And then she later says, I can have anything I want here, maybe even companionship, someone who has desire for me. And she asks Mr. Lies if he's that man, but he says it's not allowed for that. And then Harper says maybe an Eskimo, and Mr. Lies says there are no Eskimo in Antarctica. And then, interestingly enough, just down the page, on page 107, the Eskimo appears, and Harper says, an Antarctic Eskimo, a fisher of the polar deep, and Mr. Lies says, there's something wrong with this picture. So it's interesting because Mr. Lies is no longer in control of the situation, it seems like. Harper has a little bit more control, and I think that's very interesting, that she finally has control when she's away from Joe, and it just like shows her freedom and choice. For Harper, though, I think it's a very important question to ask. Is Mr. Lies just a hallucination because of her addiction? Is Mr. Lies even an angel? I think even if he is a hallucination, I think he still is kind of an angel. I think it's kind of arguable that all of these ghosts and angels are hallucinations that are necessary for all of these people to see, whether drugs are involved or not. I think for Harper, her life is so structured, like I said earlier, and I think the drugs may have been her way of opening her mind up to that opportunity, or the opportunity of like receiving an angel. Lastly, for Roy, the ghost or the angel of Ethel seems to be an early karma or reckoning. Normally karma is given in the afterlife. After you die, karma is given in the way of like a new life form. So if you have bad karma, you get the life of an animal next, like you move down the kind of chain. And if you have good karma, you move up the chain. But I think that this is kind of just like an early intervention for him. And in the scene before Ethel arrives, on page 113, Roy actually admits to Joe that he was meeting with the judge on Ethel's case before, like during the trials. And historically, this was Roy Cohn's legal downfall, as he showed his selfish swings in a court, and he was doing anything he could to get his ruling approved. For Ethel to show up and call an ambulance for Roy, though, on page 117, I think it just shows an interesting dynamic or gap between Ethel's ethics and morals and Roy's, because 4 pages prior to this, Roy was admitting to committing a crime to get his ruling passed, and then on page 117, Ethel was calling the ambulance for Roy because he's sick. And I think it's an interesting thing. It's just a really cool dynamic and binary to show between those two people. My last point that I want to bring up is that the angels and minor characters are being played by the same actors. So Angel, Emily, the nurse, and the homeless woman in the Bronx are all, those characters are all played by the same people or person. Belize and Mr. Lies are both played by the same person. And then Hannah, who's Joe's mom, Ethel Rosenberg, and the rabbi are all played by the same person. So I don't really have an answer to this yet, and this is going to be my forum question, but like, what does this mean? I think it's interesting, especially that the nurse and the angel are played by the same person. I think that's really interesting, but I think it's a cool thing to think about. Like, is there a connection between all of the people played by one person? Are they opposites? What's like the reasoning for this casting decision, and how do you interpret it? So with that, I'm going to leave you with that to think about. That's going to be my discussion forum question too. So if you're on my discussion forum, you'll have the opportunity to answer that, and all of you will have the opportunity to respond to other people's responses. So we're not going to really talk about that in the Google Meet, since that's the content of the forum. But that's all I have to say, and I will see you guys at the Google Meet on Friday.